The current project that I'm working on is a new workbench for my shop. There's a couple other videos around here on YouTube that you'll be able to see on that. In the process, that bench has storage cabinets in the base, and those storage cabinets are going to hold 8 drawers. Since this is my workbench, I wanted to spend a little extra time on it to make it right. So for the drawers, I'm doing half-blind dovetails. So I've been working on my hand-cut half-blind dovetail skills. And it's a little bit labor-intensive, but halfway through this project, we got a fun package in the mail from one of our longtime subscribers and viewers. And Bob sent us, because he didn't want to see it go to waste, a half-blind dovetail jig that he made from Woodsmith plants from way long ago. Now, the issue that it came out in was number 58, which is the August 1988 issue. And yeah, there's some people on the Woodsmith staff now that weren't even born then. What's super cool about it is that the issue goes through step by step how to make practically every part of the dovetail jig, step by step, with just a few common hardware items, threaded insert knobs, washers and nuts and that sort of thing. But then the back part of the magazine is really the owner's guide for the jig, telling you how to set up the jig, do some test cuts, and route half-blind dovetails in flush drawers as well as drawers that have like a lip all the way around. It's pretty cool. So what I wanted to do is kind of show off the jig itself. Just, it's got some vintage appeal to it, and because they just work really well. My dad built one of these way back when I was in high school, and I used it on a few projects, and then later on, shortly after I started here at Woodsmith, for a dresser that I built that's still in our bedroom. Now, a dovetail jig like this is really mostly a vise. What you have is a clamping bar and some shop-made cam clamps up front, and those secure the drawer sides to the front of the jig. Up on top, another identical clamp bar and cam clamps, and that holds the top or the drawer fronts and secures that in place. Those pin it in place, and then what you have on the top of the jig is the template that has these fingers in it, and those fingers guide a guide bushing that you install in your router and a dovetail bit. So the guide bushing follows in and out, weaving back and forth, creating the dovetails, the tails on the sides and the pins and sockets on the drawer front. I clear these pieces out of here. You know, we've talked about the clamp bars that you make, and those fit into eye bolts that you actually have to weld shut to prevent them from opening up. But there's a offset guide here, one on each side of the jig, and that keeps the pieces shifted in relation to each other so that as you're doing both the pins and the tails, when you bring the parts together, they fit automatically. So that adjusts side to side. The template that you can see here slides up and down to accommodate different thicknesses. There are some stop nuts on here that also keep the template in its right orientation, front and back, and then you can adjust that too to accommodate different thicknesses of the drawer sides that you're working on. So what I want to do is I'm going to take a couple of the drawers from my workbench and go with a blast from the past. So saddle up in the DeLorean and we're going to figure out how to use this jig. And if you're interested in making your own, we're going to have the plans available at woodsmithplans.com, so you want to be sure to check that out. When you're working with power tools, a big part of the results depends on having a careful and accurate setup. And that's exactly the case with any dovetail jig, and this one in particular. So it helps to be familiar with the steps involved to set up the jig. And you're also going to run through a couple of test cuts just to initially see where the jig is set and then what you need to do to dial in the fit. And that's what I did here. Now, the first test cut that I ran, I noticed that the sockets were being routed too far in so that my workpiece was actually recessed well away from the end of this drawer front. What that means is that the template was positioned too far back. So I used the adjusting bolts and nuts on here to bring it forward just a little bit. You're going to find all of these troubleshooting things in the instructions that come with the plans. After I made that adjustment, routed a second set, you can see here that pretty much right off the bat I have a good fit. There's a little issue down here, but I think that has to do with more of keeping the workpiece clamped securely in the jig. So I'm ready to start routing on my actual drawer pieces. And what you want to do is take care to do a little layout on your work pieces, because even though the drawer that I'm going to be working on, this corner, this will be the corner that I'm working on. When the pieces are in the jig, I'm going to have the inside faces out. So the drawer front is going to be the inside of the drawer facing up. We also need a common reference mark. So we're going to use the bottom edge of the drawer pieces for our reference. So I can slide the front into place underneath the template, and I want to make sure that it comes into contact with the adjustable stop block here. Then I've done the same thing on the drawer side. So I have the inside face and this is the bottom edge. I can bring that up from below. Next thing that I want to do is make sure that the surfaces are perfectly flush with each other, so that actually clamp the drawer front in place here. Now I'll bring the drawer side in and clamp that down as well. All right, when you have it set, there's one more thing that you need to take care of in terms of the setup. And that's the position of this stop block here. What it's doing is offsetting the side in relation to the front so that you can create the joints. Now what you're looking for is the edge of this drawer side is to be about centered on this first socket on the template. If you need to, you can adjust the position one way or the other of the stop block. I found it easiest just to use a little block of wood and a mallet and to tap it one way or the other. Now the way this jig is set up is that you'll route one corner on this side of the jig. The opposite corner is going to be routed on the other side, so don't forget to take care of that setup over here as well. Now we're ready to actually get started with the routing. I've installed the guide bushing in the router and have the bit set for a 1/2 inch deep cut. That's what the plans say, and through my test cuts I found that that should be pretty right on. Like I said, if it doesn't work out, there are ways to dial in the fit that you're looking for. First thing that I'm going to do is to make a pass from the right hand side as I'm facing my work pieces across to the left, and that's going to create a scored baseline on the drawer side. The reason for that is as you weave in and out with the router in the template, you could end up causing some chip out, but by scoring that line first, you kind of stop it in its tracks. Now, speaking of moving the router in between the fingers, you want to hold the router in a consistent position as you go in and out all of those slots on the template. And the reason for that is just in case your guide bushing isn't perfectly centered, you want to keep that same orientation of bit to guide bushing as you present the router to the template. All right, it's time for the moment of truth. Pull the pieces out here. Again, we're just going to flip them over and fold them together. There we go. They slid together pretty easily. Once I get a little glue on there, this joint is definitely not going to go anywhere, and it looks pretty good too. So if you're looking to create your own shop-built machine, you might want to consider the Woodsmith half-blind dovetail jig. Save you quite a bit of money on commercial dovetail jigs. It does one thing, it does them really well.